Hello guys, welcome back. My name's Nathan and today I'm going to be discussing the most overpaid player on every single NHL team. Now I heard on the grapevine that apparently if you make too much of this, you are A, terrible player, and B, need to be traded. So I am on the lookout for any players that fit the description of overpaid but are still freaking amazing. So if you know anybody like that, please let me know. Alright, so now that we've established that not all overpaid players are bad, we can now get into it. So, who do I see as the most overpaid players in the NHL as of right now, and who do I see as the most overpaid players on every single NHL team? Watch till the end for all my picks and all the rankings, and of course, hit that big red subscribe button for more ranking content just like this one. Now, we're going to do today's video in the normal alphabetical order, starting with the Anaheim Ducks, and I do want to mention also that this is not the worst contract on every team, but the most overpaid player just in this next 2021 season, so it doesn't matter to me how long that contract is, just how overpaid that player is right now. And a good example of that comes with the Anaheim Ducks and David Backes. He makes $4.5 million, I think only for the next 1 or 2 seasons. It's not that long, but as it stands right now, he is definitely the most overpaid guy. In terms of the worst contract, I might choose Cam Fowler, but he still is pretty effective offensively. Meanwhile, for David Backes, he has absolutely declined since his St. Louis days, got traded from the Boston Bruins, and I really don't see him being a big part of the Anaheim team for any time at all. Then going on to the Arizona Coyotes, their most overpaid player is Derek Stepan. Now, just like Backes, I think Stepan only has 1 more year left on his deal for 2021. He makes $6.5 million, and I think Stepan can still bring some value, but over the past few seasons, especially his offensive game has drastically declined, and that's a player that is nowhere near worth a $6.5 million contract. I would like him, especially as a 4th line, maybe 3rd line center, but anything more than that, which is what Arizona is having to use him as, especially at 6.5, does not look too pretty. Then going on to the Boston Bruins most overpaid player. This one was kind of hard because I don't think there's anybody drastically overpaid, but I would have John Moore at $2.75 million. Now, a lot of this is also health. He hasn't really been a main part of that defense in Boston, but not really for any of the wrong reasons. He just has not played all too great with the Boston Bruins. And I think back in his prime, Moore did provide some good all-around value, but that's a player that is just getting up there in age, and obviously he's just not a fit with the Bruins at all. Then going on to the Buffalo Sabres most overpaid player, this one's kind of obvious, and that is Jeff Skinner. Now, I think this next season he will have a rebound year, as he always does. Bad year, the rebound year, the bad year, the rebound year. But I still think even when he's at the top of his game, $9 million is a little bit rich for me. And there's nobody that really makes too much on the Buffalo Sabres besides him, so I think Jeff Skinner is kind of the obvious candidate. Then going on to the Calgary Flames, we have the man, the myth, the legend in Milan Lucic. Now, he makes $5.25 million. And even though he provides some great grit, some great terrorizing value, offensively, defensively, you know, what you want to see in the game and what wins you games, doesn't really bring that too much, but hey, he does have the grit, he does have the character, and I still think Calgary definitely has a lot of value in that, and should, because there is some needed character in Calgary, and I think Milan Lucic does bring that. Then going on to the Carolina Hurricanes, my pick is going to be Brady Shea. He makes $5.2 million for I think the next 3 or 4 seasons, but that's a player that I just don't see as too much of a long-term fit with the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm not sure what they're planning to do with him because I think that contract is overpaid, but it's not too much. I think he's around $3.54 million, so I don't think it's too much of an overpayment, but especially for the Carolina Hurricanes, that extra $1.5 million definitely makes a big difference. Then going on to the Chicago Blackhawks, and I had a hard time judging if I was going to put this player on the list, but it was Brent Seabrook. He makes $6.8 million. Now, I wasn't contemplating if I was going to put the player on the list because he's not overpaid. He is absolutely overpaid, but I think there is some potential issues if he's actually going to play next season. But it looks like he is progressing health-wise and could play some games with the Blackhawks next year, so I put him here, and he's the obvious candidate. He's probably worth a league minimum contract, if that. He's making 6.8, which is not fun for the Blackhawks. Then going on to the Colorado Avalanche, my pick is going to be Erik Johnson at that $6 million cap hit. Now, I think Erik Johnson provides some good defensive value, good leadership, a strong character, but at $6 million, it's not the prettiest. And even though his deal isn't humongously long, I still think Colorado would definitely like to have that a lot less as they get into the really contending age and era that they're in. Then going on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, I have Nick Foligno at $5.5 million. Now, I would have picked Brandon Dubinsky, but it's looking like he's never going to play an NHL game again, so I thought that was a little bit unfair. I picked Nick Foligno because even though he has some great character and I think he provides a decent all-around game, 5.5 is just way too much for a guy like that who's probably at the most a really great third line, good second line guy. But I don't know. I definitely want to give that contract to him, even though he does provide a lot of that off-ice character for Columbus. Then going on to the Dallas Stars, my favorite team, and I'm going to pick my favorite player in Jamie Benn. $9.5 million on the deal. I mean, Jamie Benn, just like a lot of other guys, provides great character, great off-ice leadership, and in the playoffs got better and better, but 9.5 is still way too much. He signed that when he was really getting into his prime and really looking good. And for the Dallas Stars, it was looking like a contract that would not be great because 9.5 is a lot, but it would be worth it because of how he was playing offensively. That offensive game has dropped off, and even though he still can score some goals, it's just not, it's nowhere where it needed to be and where it was back in his prime. I think the Dallas Stars are kind of hurting because of it. Then going on to the Detroit Red Wings, I got my Nicholas Lidstrom jersey on right now, and we're going to talk about Mark Stahl, who is definitely not Nicholas Lidstrom. He makes $5.7 million on the books right now, and he only has 1 year left on the contract, so especially for Detroit, it doesn't really matter too much, but yeah, I mean, if you have Stahl anything more than your bottom pairing, it's not looking too pretty. Then going on to the Edmonton Oilers, my pick is still going to be James Neal. He makes $5.7 million right now, and even though he did have a great solid year, especially to start out, it's still too much for a guy like that, and it's still too much length. So even though it is looking better than Milan Lucic, it's still not looking great at 5.7, in my opinion. Then going on to the Florida Panthers, this one was kind of obvious, and to me, it's Sergei Bobrovsky. It's hard to judge Bobrovsky because I think he's kind of dealt with some injuries, potentially in his first year of Florida. If he's fully healthy, I think he'll get more back to that better NHL goaltender that we know. But even at his peak, I'm not sure if he was worth $10 million. I'm a big proponent of not really paying your goaltenders too much. I think goaltenders are kind of voodoo and wacky, and you see a guy like Anton Khudobin, who was the backup for Dallas going into the Stanley Cup final and being probably the best goaltender in that playoffs. I mean, that's just how it happens sometimes. And for the Florida Panthers, you see how that randomness comes into play. I think Bobrovsky is an excellent goaltender at his peak, but $10 million right now is obviously too much. Then going on to the LA Kings, we're getting into the obvious of the obvious, that being Drew Doughty at that $11 million cap hit. And I think Drew Doughty in his prime was an excellent defenseman, top 5, but if you think Drew Doughty's a top 10 defenseman right now, I have some bad news for you. And if you think he's anything worth, or anywhere close to worth $11 million, I also have some pretty bad news as well. Drew Doughty, I still think provides good offensive value, but his defensive game has been disastrous since, I would say, about 2017. And he's a big reason why the defense kind of can't defend sometimes. I think offensively, he's still good, but I don't even know if I would touch around $8 million for him. That would be the most I would give him, like around $7 million at this point. I mean, you can pay him $11 million. Again, it doesn't really affect LA too much because of the state they're in, but it doesn't exactly help too much either. Then going on to the Minnesota Wild, my pick is going to be Ryan Suter. Now again, this is a pretty hard team to pick. I think Suter, who makes right now $7.5 million, also is probably the worst contract on the team. And I think Suter still provides some good game, great defensive value still, but his offensive game, just overall impact-wise, especially even strength, has kind of fallen off a little bit. And that's a guy that has kind of fallen by the wayside while guys like Jared Spurgeon really carry that team. I still think he's a good player, but not worth that cap hit or that contract right now. Then going on to the Montreal Canadiens, and I'm just going to say this right now, Habs fans, I still like Carey Price, but if you don't have him here, I don't know who you would have. I mean, Jonathan Drouin maybe, but I think Carey Price is the most obvious to be the most overpaid player. I mean, I still think Carey Price is one of the better goaltenders in the NHL, and at his prime, and when he's at his peak, he's fantastic. But I don't think there's any goaltender out there right now that's worth $10.5 million, and especially not Carey Price right now. And for the next, 1,000 billion years, to me, Carey Price is still a good goaltender, but I wouldn't pay a goaltender anywhere near that at this point. Then going on to the Nashville Predators, my pick is going to be Ryan Johansson. He makes $8 million right now, and it's just kind of disappointing to see how Johansson's career has gone because his trajectory was looking real good with Columbus, and when he went to Nashville, there was a lot of excitement, as there should have been, and it just hasn't really progressed at all. I think Johansson still has some tough minutes, and he's the #1 guy there in Nashville. That's a lot of pressure, but still, when you're making $8 million, you've got to expect a lot more. Then going on to the New Jersey Devils, my pick is going to be PK Subban. Now, I defend PK Subban a lot. I think he's going to have a good year next year, but the point still stands that he's not worth $9 million and isn't worth anywhere close to that. I think his offensive game is still good, but that's a player that will really need to rebound next season, especially to make that contract look anywhere close to relevant. Then going on to the New York Islanders, my pick is going to be Andrew Ladd, making $5.5 million. And I think he played like 3 games or something with the Islanders this season. Most he's been in the AHL. So, yeah, that experiment from 2016, I believe, not exactly looking too great for New York. And they would like to have that contract back a lot, especially in this Matthew Barzal negotiation. But I guess we can't have that. Now on to the New York Rangers. My pick is going to be Brendan Smith. Now, he makes $4.3 million only for the next season. But, I mean... There's nobody else, really. I mean, maybe you go Jacob Trouba, but I think he's going to rebound next year and be more worth what the New York Rangers gave him. Meanwhile, for Brendan Smith, I mean, the Rangers had to try him out at wing. That's how kind of disastrous this whole experiment has been. I think he provides a roster spot, but anything much more than that, I wouldn't exactly get your hopes up. Then going on to the Ottawa Senators, my pick is going to be Nikita Zaitsev, $4.5 million. Again, a little bit more of an obvious one. But the thing is, for the Ottawa Senators, I mean... we could laugh at this contract all we want. It doesn't even matter for them. In fact, it's actually probably good for them since they need to get to that cap floor. I think he's all right. He's all right, but $4.5 million obviously is just too much. Then going on to the Philadelphia Flyers, my pick at another $4.5 million defenseman is going to be Shane Gostisbehere. Now, I think Shane Gostisbehere, his rookie year was fantastic, but since then he hasn't been nearly as effective. And I think that's a player that offensively still has a lot of potential, but he needs to be in the right situation. He needs to be given first power play minutes, and Philadelphia just has not been able to do that. In the right situation, I think he can be good, and maybe worth that contract. But on the Philadelphia Flyers, it's not looking too good. Then going on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, my pick is going to be Mike Matheson, making $4.8 million. I mean, I think Matheson actually, I think he will actually surprise some people and be a lot better than we've seen. I think he's going to get a little more responsibility and be one of the main guys on the Penguins and actually be all right, but 4.8 for like the next 5 years or whatever it is disastrous. And for a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins who needs all the money they can get, I still have no idea why the heck they traded for him. Then going on to the San Jose Sharks, my pick is going to be Marc-Edouard Vlasic. Honestly, in my opinion, I think this might be the worst contract in the NHL. $7 million for, I think it goes up to like 2023 or something, but or 2024 actually, or like I don't actually does it. I'll have it somewhere on the screen. It goes forever, basically. And Marc-Edouard Vlasic is a guy that, in his prime, was one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL. But since then, has become practically useless. Defensively, he's negative value right now. And offensively, it's just, no. You just don't want to see that. And I think Vlasic, I'm hoping he's healthy, hoping he rebounds to the Sharks. But if he's not, that contract is looking even worse than it already is. Then going on to the St. Louis Blues, my pick is going to be Justin Faulk at 6.5. I think Justin Faulk, offensively, he does his job. But in terms of an all-around defenseman, I'm not sure how much value there is for a team like St. Louis. And now, especially with Torrey Krug on that team, I mean, who's going to get the first power play minutes? Is it going to be Krug or Faulk? You would think it would be Krug. But now, if it's Krug at the number 1 power play minutes, where does that leave Faulk? And how much of an opportunity does he get? I think that contract that St. Louis gave, instantly when that contract happened, I knew it was terrible, and it's looking that way too. I mean, if they never signed Justin Faulk and they never traded for Justin Faulk, they probably don't have to give up Alex Pietrangelo, and the rest would be history. So, I don't know. I think he can still provide some value, but not in the way that I think St. Louis planned. Then going on to the Tampa Bay Lightning, my pick is going to be Tyler Johnson, $5 million right now. I think Johnson is a solid middle six winger, but that's a player that has lost his step since his prime around 2015 and since that contract was signed. I think he's an alright player, but again, around $5 million, not sure about that one. Then going on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, this is probably one of the, I think this is tied for Drew Doughty as the second highest cap I'm going to mention today, that being John Tavares. Now, he makes $11 million, and I want to stress right now that I do not think that adding Tavares was a super bad idea by the Leafs or that he's a bad player or anything. I think he's just overpaid for what he brings the Leafs. I think he should be around an 8.5, 9 million cap hit, and I think that would be pretty much perfect. He makes too much, but on Toronto, there's not really too many players that make absolutely too much or any egregious contracts. Most of them are pretty alright, so maybe being a little bit too much, but I think John Tavares will still be my pick here. Then going on to the Vancouver Canucks, we're just going to flip the switch. This is actually the best contract and the most or least overpaid player on every team. And, of course, it's Loui Eriksson. I mean, he's the best player of them all. I mean, again, the appreciation post. We gotta bring the love, baby. He's an absolute GOAT. Don't you dare diss my boy. And going on to the Vegas Golden Knights, and now we're back to most overpaid player on every team, so don't you worry. I'm going to go with Marc-Andre Fleury. He makes $7 million for this year and then next. And there wasn't really any players that really made too much on Vegas, in my opinion. Marc-Andre Fleury is kind of the closest to that. If he gets back to that 2018 level, that first year in Vegas, then I think he's not overpaid. But if he continues the trend of this last season, then I think that's a player that's just making way too much, especially for the position that Vegas is in. I'm really hoping he rebounds, though, and that tandem of Fleury and Leonard are one of the best in the NHL next season. Then going on to the Washington Capitals, just like Vegas, it was kind of hard to pinpoint the worst contract on the team. I'm going to go Justin Schultz at $4 million, just newly signed, $4 million for I think the next 2 seasons. And I think Schultz in his prime was solid, but that's a player that's definitely been banged up, isn't what he used to be. And unless Washington can really make a resurgence of that, I'm kind of skeptical of that contract, especially. Then going on to the Winnipeg Jets, another tough one to me, but I'm going to go Paul Stastny at $6.5 million. Now, I do want to stress that I think Paul Stastny will do really well in Winnipeg this next year with Patrick Laine, but I still think it is a little bit too much for a guy like that at 6.5. But again, for the Winnipeg Jets, they don't really, it doesn't really matter too much right now. They have some decent cap space, at least for this season, and they could definitely afford to add a guy like that. I still think it's a good addition and will be great for Winnipeg, especially in that top 6 going forward. But that'll be it for the most overplayed player for every team. I can't tell you guys how many times I said overplayed player in this video. I just want to forget that. Anyways, hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on my picks. What do you agree and disagree with? And let me know who is the most overpaid player on your favorite NHL team. Make sure you share this video with your friends. Get it out there. Click this card for all my ranking content right on the playlist. I love you, and I love you, and I love you, but I love Loui Eriksson more. And I'll see you in the next video or stream. Goodbye.